Well, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here, and especially because of this amazing panel that has been able to make it here despite all the parking and other complications of the moment. I was just telling somebody the last time I spoke at Friends of Architecture was the 2016, and presidential candidate Trump had just announced that there was a caravan of millions of illegal aliens sweeping across the border in San Diego. And so I said to the audience, I hope you were all able to get here this morning. I know there was a lot of traffic. Everyone laughed. Of course, there were no caravans. There were no millions of people crossing into San Diego. And yesterday, the Supreme Court ruled on a very important ruling about the illegality of the tariffs that the federal government, that the president had imposed on the rest of the world. So it has an effect on our border. And if you read the San Diego Union Tribune today, there were quite a few commentaries from local businesses about how that's affected them. We in this room share in different disciplines through the lens of urban design, architecture, landscape architecture, planning, and community activism, and other disciplines. We all share a concern about the future of our built environment. And my work for many years has argued that our built environment here is not just San Diego. It's San Diego and Tijuana. We live in what I call a trans-frontier metropolis. A cross-border region, if you imagine Minneapolis, St. Paul, no one talks about that region as if it's two separate places. They're interconnected. And here in the San Diego-Tijuana region, every day we breathe the same air, we share the same water, we're faced with the same environmental hazards, wildfires, earthquakes. We share an economy. 50,000 people commute to work on a daily basis from Mexico into San Diego County. 2 million trucks cross every year. Tens of millions of people cross for tourism and to shop and visit their families. We are a $200+ billion annual cross-border economy. We have hundreds, thousands of factories in Tijuana that produce equipment, goods, clothing, and other industrialized products that cross back into Southern California and beyond. So we truly are a transnational, globalizing metropolis. And yet, as a famous French urbanist called Henri Lefebvre once said, all urban space is political. And so is ours. Because we have this international boundary, it defines a region that has constantly come under the microscope, especially lately. And that microscope has included decisions that make it more challenging for this trans-frontier metropolis to function in a healthy way. And those of us that are in the business of worrying about our built environment, whether we're architects or planners or citizens, community activists, city planners, artists, we have a role in helping understand and shape this built environment. And that's why our panel today, Design Across the Border, I wanted to bring the perspective of the other side, el otro lado. So I invited 4 really interesting and talented professionals who range from artists to architects, urbanists, I call us all. We're all concerned about how we build the built environment, how we construct it, and what will happen in the future. So without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker. In no particular order, I just basically took the order that those who composed the advertisement for this panel used. I don't know if it's alphabetical or not, but I went with it. So our first speaker is Hugo Crosthwaite. I've had the pleasure of meeting Hugo in the last year. He's a very talented artist from Tijuana, and he works in a variety of media, including large-scale murals, urban signage, and commercial facades. His work has included permanent connections at the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, and the Museum of Contemporary Art, San Diego. His experiences growing up in the frenetic urban landscape of Tijuana is often reflected in his artwork. And I should also point out that he has an exhibition about to open at the San Diego Museum of Art right here in Balboa Park, which will be opening, I believe, in the fall. So please welcome Hugo Grossman. One last thing. After all the panelists speak, we'll have a question and answer and open discussion. So please stick around for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm a visual artist. I'm from Tijuana. I'm a visual artist. I'm terrible with words, so please forgive me. My language is visual. So we could start the PowerPoint. Let's see. So I was born in Tijuana, and my father had a curio shop in Rosarito. A curio shop is a place where we sell this idea of Mexico to American tourists. So then, while I was growing up, basically I just was taught to tell stories. You know? Like, oh yes, like this is, we sell little idols. And this is Coatlicue, and we sacrifice virgins to her. So it's $5. Also, then, because the American tourists always wanted to have this kind of adventure, like an Indiana Jones experience where they go down and they find the exoticism of Mexico. So then I grew up in this curio shop, which was very eclectic, filled with very chaotic imagery all around. Next slide, please. Which I feel is very much reflected in what the city of Tijuana is. So then I took a lot of inspiration in all of my work in this kind of very improvised and chaotic view that Tijuana represents. Next slide. So my drawings basically tell stories, tell stories about what I feel Tijuana represents. And I was very much influenced by this notion of La Leyenda Negra, which is something I discovered when I actually moved away from Tijuana and lived in New York and Chicago for a while. And people would always refer to Tijuana as this place where, I got so drunk in Tijuana. So then to me, it was very interesting because growing up in a curio shop, I never really heard about La Leyenda Negra, but then when I was outside, I would hear this connotation of Tijuana as a sin city. Next slide, please. So then my drawings try to reflect this chaotic element of this make-believe world in a way, a surrealist world, that plays with this notion of La Tijuana, La Leyenda Negra, the black legend of Tijuana. Next slide, please. So then, for example, this drawing plays with the notion of El Bambi, an infamous bar, in La Revolución, which plays with this idea again, but of Tijuana as a playground for American tourists, like an adult Disneyland. Next slide, please. So then, this is a project that I've been working on because I improvise on my drawings. I don't plan anything, and it's part of my creative process that, like Tijuana, I feel is very improvised and chaotic. My work is the same way. I don't pre-plan anything. So then I started doing these murals where I would just go into a space as a performance, and in 2 weeks I would just improvise a mural without any concepts or anything pre-drawn. It was just about creating imagery like poetry on the wall. So I'm going to show this video, please. Could you play it? Can you go back and play a video? So then I will go to this space, and in 2 weeks, I will just start drawing, improvising a mural. So then the way I taught myself how to draw was by drawing details. I never went thoroughly to school to learn how to create art. It was always been just drawing details and then linking those details together. So in a way, more than working like a painter, I work more like a poet, where you're stringing together words, and each word is a symbol, and so you're creating a narrative. So then that's the way I work. I just start with faces and bodies, and then start creating a narrative as I go along. So then I wear this shirt that says Hugo Rótulos. Rótulos means sign painter. So then, as a performance, I'm an actor. I'm not an artist. I'm somebody who's just creating imagery on the wall, and people would come into the space and they didn't know if I was an artist or if I was hired by the artist to do this. So then it was this character that I created, as El Rotulista. And then after 2 weeks of creating the mural, I would start deconstructing the mural by painting these white squares. which is similar to what Borges would do with his poetry, where he would deconstruct his poetry by separating the words and deconstructing the poem to study the visual elements of each word. So then, in the same way, I would deconstruct the mural, referencing that. Next slide, please. This is Tijuana, mi amor. Next slide. So this is a project that I did for Mesa College, where I decided that I wanted to play with this idea of how, in a way, Tijuana always seemed to, San Diego always seemed to me like this bastion trying to keep Tijuana at bay. So then I decided that for this exhibition, I wanted to have this pristine white cube. Next slide, please. And then on the inside, I would be again like creating this mural performance where I would be inside and just be improvising houses and doors and improvising this chaotic landscape of Tijuana. No? And then next to it, I would play a stop motion drawing animation similar to what you just saw with the other mural, where you're seeing image created on the wall. It would be this animation that basically is these constructions, these drawings that are being constructed on a page, where it's also again mimicking this idea of an improvised city. Because I grew up that way. My father had a curio shop, and then once we had a little bit more money, we would build another room. So then what used to be the kitchen suddenly became something else. No? So then throughout the years, suddenly we would have doors that would lead to nowhere because we no longer need them. No? So then it was creating this environment that's being improvised as we lived our lives. No? Next slide, please. You can play the video, please. So, yes. So basically, what you saw throughout the exhibition was this very pristine cube that's trying to hold the city of Tijuana inside. And then as I was working through it, creating this chaotic environment inside, at the end of the exhibition, the mural elements would start coming out of the cube. Like this idea that, San Diego is trying to hold Tijuana at bay, but in the end, it can't. It's impossible to hold, an unstoppable city like Tijuana. No? And the video played with notions of what is a home. Architecture that's being built, that's improvised, this notion of gentrification, but then also at the end of the video, as you can see in the video, it's a house built in adobe, also, which were the original settlements that were here, that were built in adobe, which would be the future also, I would think, of architecture in a way of something creating that's sustainable and not contaminated. Next slide, please. So then I've been doing this concept of these mural performances throughout my career. This is something that I did at the Washington University last year. Next slide, please. So then again, I would go into the space with this as being this character, el rotulista, Hugo Rótulos, and I would just start improvising on the wall. But then, of course, when you go to a space and you're improvising a mural, you're taking narratives from people that are there. So then, when they found out that I was a Mexican artist, a lot of the students would come up to me and they would talk about what they're worried about. And they were worried about immigration, and the Trump administration and all this. So then the mural itself started incorporating their worries and their narratives into the wall. Next slide, please. So then throughout 2 weeks, again, I was painting this mural and creating this world that dealt with this notion of Tijuana being placed at Washington University, and then the stories that people wanted to tell me or share with me, which I thought it was always a wonderful experience. Me not being an artist, but being this character, rotulista, they felt comfortable talking to me because there's always put artists on pedestals. But me being like this worker, this guy who's just improvising on the wall, directly on the wall, demystifying the art process, they felt comfortable talking to me and telling me their stories, and I would tell them my story, and it would all go into the mural. Next slide, please. So you can see elements of pop culture and cross-culturalization and trans-culturalization and all this. Next slide, please. So that was the completed mural after 2 weeks. grabbing the stories of the students and myself and creating this narrative. And in the end, the mural was entitled Blue, White, and Red, kind of like the opposite of red, white, and blue. The worries that they were having, that things are being reversed in this notion of the United States, which used to be a beacon of freedom and liberty and democracy. Next slide, please. So then, continuing this project, I was invited to do the same thing at Norco College in this past October. Next slide, please. So then again, but this time, instead of just me being the storyteller, I invited the students to take part. So then I would start the mural and I would start creating a narrative, and then the students would come in, those who felt comfortable, and they would start doing their own imagery. Next slide, please. So then a lot of the imagery, which I was surprised, I did not tell them what to draw or what to paint. They just started doing imagery of their own. And what they started doing was, they started doing imagery of ice raids. Next slide, please. So then I also presented, through that exhibition, I created also murals that were relating to the narratives that they wanted to see, that they wanted to express, that they felt that needed to be heard. So then I also started then doing also imagery of ice raids and renditions. Next slide, please. So I feel like this idea of me bringing Tijuana and the chaos and its stories that are being, like I mentioned earlier, San Diego as a bastion trying to keep Tijuana at bay. Well, I'm here, I'm on the other side, and I've spilled over, and I'm bringing my stories and my concerns here and sharing them with other Americans and other people and students. Next slide. So yeah, that's it, I think. And I think I've done kind of it.
Thank you so much, Hugo. If you could just turn the lights on for 1 second. Unless there's a light. Great. So I'm going to switch gears now. I'm going to introduce our second speakers. You guys are together, right? It's a team. Adriana Cuellar and Marcel Sanchez Prieto. Adriana they're both associate professors at the University of San Diego. She is director of the architecture program and a co-partner in their CRO studios. She has a BA from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo and a master's from Harvard University. And she's also they're both recipients of the Rome Prize Fellowship in Design from the American Academy in Rome. And their studio projects addresses cultural, economic, and environmental challenges facing those in everyday border conditions. Marcel Sanchez Prieto is also associate professor in architecture at the University of San Diego and also co-founder of the CRO Studio. And he was born in Tijuana, and he also received the Rome Prize, and his work also looks at architecture as a social catalyst to address societal challenges, especially in the border regions. So it's really a great honor to have both of you here. Thank you very much for speaking.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Yes. Well, thank you so much for the invitation. I just want to say this was amazing what you showed right now, and I think it resonates a lot with what you're trying to accomplish, and you're already doing it. So I don't know if the image is ready. Okay, so I think it's coming. Okay, great. Just because we're in present time. So yes, like I said, we were part of the University of San Diego, and I want to talk about a little bit of the idea of what frames a little bit in a very synthesized way. Next. So first thing I want to show is that, and you know, but I wanted to show this image because it's very difficult to kind of start without knowing a little bit what our context is. And I always use this Tijuana River watershed because almost 70 or 80% is in Tijuana, right, in Mexico. But almost 100% of the watershed comes out to the US, just in that sliver there. So this boundary, natural boundary, is juxtaposed with the artificial boundary of what would is being more political country. So this territory, which is shared, but at the same time is not administered in the same way, you have a very conflicting kind of condition. The next. But also how these stories, the idea of defining that edge and also the erasure of the city. What you see in the top is our house in Tijuana, and the property line, the limit of the lot is the international border. So for us has been very present, this idea of defining the definition of border. What you see in the slide on the right is when Trump was first in as a president, and that sliver of the lot was built in 1 hour. So that definition, that what it's saying is the expedient condition of how defining the differentiation of those two things. But also we have seen in the city of Tijuana the erasure, I sometimes call it a city without a memory, because constantly these buildings are being erased, the conditions of history has been erased. So I think what Hugo was saying, this idea of kind of drawing and erasing in many ways, you have this condition in the city that is trying demarcating, but at the same time erasing the city so much. So that's why I think, wow, this relates to that. Next. So we have several projects, and I'm just going to show you one project that has been very important for us. Of course, this is I call it the one-hit project for us, kind of thing. But this project is a project that we did in considered one of the areas with highest crime rate in Tijuana. And what we wanted to do is that how do we deal with this kind of architecture that needs to kind of negotiate in this context? And we created this small library that it was not intended as a library, but it's a small library that at the beginning we started kind of considering it's not an enamorment of the material, it's not an enamorment for how the building is going to perceive the materiality. It's a blank canvas that people can paint, that people can do, the murals can happen in it, and it's just a framework. Next. So the only thing that we did is that we just started creating a small texture, and so the whole thing had to be built in less than 4 months with a budget of $100,000. And next. Can you play the video? No, just play the video there if you can. There should be a there. Oh, there should be a. I think that. Anyways, there's a video of people protesting because the building was taken over because it was a change of government, and the building was taken over. And when they took over, they said the building's not going to be anymore our library. It's going to be the headquarters of the political party. And so the people came out and protested for 3 days. And at the end of the video, it shows that the little girl says, one of the things that you can give us is access to knowledge. Education is the most important thing that you can give us to us. And for me, that moment became really important. That, I think, was a very crucial moment to become more embedded in education, to be a professor and see what is the type of education we are constructing. Next. So, of course, this building works as an amphitheater. Next. Works also a way to kind of have concerts, movies. So it tries to do many things, right? As you're talking about the OSS, the houses and everything, all the elements in architecture or the city itself tries to do many things at the same time. Next. So in that regard, because education was very important, because we know that what as architects we're doing, it's not only just buildings, but we are trying to build knowledge, we're trying to build people. We are trying to build a cohesive thing. So that's where I started Transborder Association Architectural Education, or DAE in Spanish, which is this series of architecture schools from Tijuana and San Diego. They started here, and now we have schools from Ciudad Juarez and El Paso, Texas, also. So next. That's wrong. Next. There it is. So we have created this association where we're bringing together students from both sides of the border. We question the idea of civicness, or we question the idea of what is the condition of the border, as a region, what do we need to consider to design for? Next. In the first edition, we culminated in this Convergent Horizons, which Alfonso participated in this collaboration that day, and what we wanted to kind of reflect of where's the past, what is the present, and what is the future? And what is the future if we're continuing to live in this context? What are the future types of education and what type of architecture we need to start forming? So we created also this collaborative kind of design studios where we start exchanging ideas and learning from each other. So one of the biggest challenges, I think, is indifference that we have in this context. And one of the things that we need to overcome is how to gain trust. Right? And in this process of learning from each other and trying to work together in schools, that's what we're trying to do, gaining trust and overcome that indifference. Thanks. So we think that it's very important to publish and we created this newspaper, the first edition, to put in one way of physical form the knowledge, the things that we've experienced, what we have learned from each other. Next. And also we have been doing exhibitions, like for instance, Christopher Alexander 1975 project, that this history has been forgotten or erased in many ways. We're trying to bring them back together with Insight, where we created an exhibition in Bread and Salt, and it went to Mexicali, and currently, right now, is an exhibition in U.S Mexico. Thanks. So this works is that we created a fellowship, an Insight Fellowship, where we are working with 22 students, 2 students from each school, in trying to work what is the future of education, and also learning the history of this region that is important to understand where are we. Next. So like I said, this is an exhibition that becomes a classroom, becomes a way that these students and fellows are being visiting all the ones that has been exhibited to. Next. And now we're starting our second year, right, of this, and this culminates in the conclusion of the second year, where we gave more voice to the students to know where are their concerns, to really capture what are their kind of lives in this kind of context and understand what we needed to kind of also give to them. Next. So anyways, right now, one of the things that is important also is that we are creating publications. We are almost, I think next month it's going to be printed. We're working with Akine, and this is the one project that we wanted to kind of rescue from history is the project by Morphosis, the first houses that they created. Basically, is the first project that they created in Tijuana in 1975. And if you don't know Morphosis, Tom Main won the Pritzker Prize in architecture. And like winning the Pritzker Prize in architecture is like winning the Nobel Prize in architecture. And their first project of this firm is in Tijuana, and it was this social housing in Tijuana. So we're trying to rescue this project and put it back, and then we created this knowledge of this book to kind of give to students, to give universities as becoming part of the knowledge. Next. So also what we're doing right now is that working, since we are a region, like Larry was saying, but in reality there's a lot of conflict to really land use and land planning, both sides is very rarely kind of work together. So we are working together with Dinora Gonzalez on trying to create exploratory scenario plans to think what are the most unthinkable things that we can kind of foresee, how this kind of planning that happens from one side to another side, we can kind of create a way of reacting to it. Right, so we are trying to create this scenario. There's a QR code for if you're interested, because we're going to do 2 workshops in both sides of the border if you want to participate. Anyway, thank you. Let's go to the next one. So at the end, here we have, I'm going to finish with this. These are the two publications. And I just wanted to give you a glimpse of what the Transborder Association and why we are part of the USD University trying to do more work with students in this context.
Okay, and I will continue the conversation next. First, I want to, as well, say it is really an honor to be here with such amazing colleagues, and thank you again for the invitation. So parallel to our cross-studio work and the tie and this importance of design architecture and the teaching of our region has been central to us, that part of the education that started as well, from the library, from the way that we approach very specific architectural projects in ways that are meaningful for us in the contributions to our region, and how do we stitch them as well into the pedagogy of the university. So parallel to TAE, we have been developing the Border Design Lab at USC, which has been an initiative to go deeper into specific topics that deal with the border region through the pedagogies of design architecture and building partnerships and specific collaborations based on those linear research. I'm going to present one, the most recent one, and we're moving into other topics. Next one, please. So 2 years ago, we received a grant from the San Diego Foundation to continue developing the border ecologies project that we started with students at USC. It is specifically, we've been working on the Cañada de los Sauces Norte, which is, I'll talk about it in a second, the first canyon that is next to the ocean. And particularly, we're trying we partner with Promotora de las Bellas Artes in Tijuana, with USD, and they have, it's a nonprofit organization, amazing, that they have been working with for over 30 years with children of the border in Tijuana, from elementary schools, public schools, through education about the environment. Something that hasn't, been brought into the curriculum, and understanding more of the territory. And we've been doing that similarly, in the college, at the university level. So we partner, those two institutions. And next, please. And it is a question to look at how to, one image is missing, that's true. How to recognize our border landscape. As we know, what is at the foreground, and for good reasons, it has been the political, social and cultural aspects that we live every day. But behind all of these, and going back to Laura's wonderful introduction on the temporary paradise 50 years ago, thinking about the border through the lens of the landscape, our watershed. And the image is missing from the flood in 1916, but so we've been developing, an archive of drawings and the understanding of the current conditions of the water, to, in a way, to reach that level of sometimes technical knowledge to the general public. Our landscape has been transformed dramatically in several periods, specifically in 1972 with the canalization of the Tijuana River, and all of the challenges that have gone through, from hardening the canyons in Tijuana, the pollution, and then the sea level, the rising levels of the coast in the next 100 years. As you can see, many areas around here in Imperial Beach, Pacific Beach, and some areas even in Del Mar will be underwater. Next. So this, the Border Design Lab, we worked with specific teams on mapping and design strategies about this specific topic. So these have been some of the imagery from the students, and then as well, we developed workshops with children in Tijuana and the Cañada, that as well tries to recognize through the drawing the landscape. Where is the river in Tijuana? Trying to capture that. Next. So this material has, built that kind of both scientific, creative design, and community knowledge into recognizing and how to register our landscape. And this particularly is the Cañada de los Sauces Norte. We have been developing these drawings of the transformations between 2000 and 2025. In 2011, it was declared one of the first conservation sites in Tijuana. There's only 3, which is basically this Cañada divided in north and south, and then the Cerro de Colorado, which nobody knows. And obviously, with the transformation of building, the densification of residential towers on top of the watershed has been a major transformation, and the continuity of the challenges of pollution, although luckily it's mostly organic pollution that creates a very interesting landscape from that highly fertilized soil. Next. And so we've been trying to map out the vegetation and using the architectural design skills to make a visual for that information to arrive to the general public and visualizing the existing ecology of this particular cañada. And through that, we're working right now, this is a work in progress site plan that hopefully becomes a platform where there's so many community groups, wonderful activists in the area from Friendship Park, Proyecto Fronterizo, who are the protectors of the landscape, and we can work now with these drawings as ways to infill the ideas, the community ideas in developing this a tangible implementation for conservation. Next. So more of the speculative images of what could the future of the landscape could address. We're moving now into topics of heritage and monuments in the city, as Marcel was mentioning in the beginning. The city transforms so rapidly, and at the same time, it's in constant erasure and reconstruction, which is a wonderful quality. But there are other, long-standing abandoned structures that potentially could be demolished because of the lack of resources to name them patrimony of the cultural heritage. So we're working now in the Plaza Monumental, trying to understand its values to the city and the potential of other imaginaries of this very large concrete parking lot in front of such an incredible ecology between the estuary and the canyons. Next. So we just finished putting together this exhibition last month in the front gallery in San Isidro. Unfortunately, it's down, but we're moving it into Tijuana, partly in Secut for Design Week, and then there will be the design strategies. We have to call it design strategies of empathy. That those evolving drawings will be displayed in the Secut in September. So we'll make sure to let you know. So next, this material is becoming part of registration and departing to a new publication now with Border Ecologies, where we're putting together not only this information, but we're bringing scholars and practitioners from the region of the U.S. Mexico, Colorado River, Tijuana-San Diego, of course. And we have a key section that deals about the border and an Aya section that deals about parallel estuary and water conditions in different parts of the world with wonderful scholars. So we hope to have that publication next year. Next, please. And at the same time, this last, the last portion of our collaboration with Moderator was to bring all of these drawings together, thinking of it, how can we create an impact through imagery, very similar to the ideas of sensualizing and bringing the new generations to acknowledge, our territory. So I created a series of illustrations that we worked together, from our workshops with the children, and next please. And these illustrations speak about, of course, our territory. Some are real, some are fictional, and it's about these two birds that meet at the border. One is a native species, the chavan, and then one is a migratory duck, the pato colorado, which they meet and they go around the estuary, the rivers, and different conditions between San Diego and Tijuana, trying to find food, shelter, and so on, and then discover different urban conditions that we know. And so the book is under production right now. I hope next month to have it. So next, and I think that's it. Yes, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. So much to think about. We have one more speaker, And definitely, I would say last but not least, another formidable designer. Thank you. So our last speaker is Alfonso Medina. Alfonso was born actually in Texas. I didn't know that. He's an architect and developer, so a slightly different version of the urbanism and architecture and design story of Tijuana-San Diego. He has founded various development groups that design and build housing, including T38 in Mexico, the Madeline Group in New York and Los Angeles, and RAF in Mexico City. He currently designs and builds housing in the Tijuana-San Diego region. Please welcome Alfonso Medina.
Thank you so much, sir, for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to be in events with colleagues I really admire. Beautiful, beautiful work, both of you guys. And yeah, I think as Hugo was saying, Tijuana really is an improvised city. I grew up in Tijuana, but I left the city about 20 years ago, and I just recently came back to live in San Diego, and I have forgotten like this idea of crossing the border every day, how much of an interesting dynamic it is. And all of my work has always been focused 100% on housing, but I think it has really been impacted by growing up in Tijuana, crossing the border every day, and really understanding this two radically different cultures. This idea of improvising, I think, as we were saying, in the improvised city, improvising has always really been a part of my work, because that's how I learned, I guess. Next. I mean, just very quickly, as Larry was saying, my life and my practice has been going like back and forth between Mexico and the US. I started building housing in Tijuana when I was 21, clearly improvising because I had no idea what I was doing. Somehow it worked out, but then I did a master's in urbanism in LA, lived there for a bit, then I moved to New York. I lived there for 10 years, and really everything I was doing in New York was very much based on what we had done and learned in Tijuana. Then came back and did actually that last thing, Francis, is multifamily housing, which actually doesn't really exist as a development model in Mexico. So from what I had learned in New York, we started doing that in Mexico, and now actually we're about to start developing housing here in San Diego. So everything has always been like just really back and forth. Next. This was my first office, actually, as I was saying, when I was 21. I really learned by doing, by being on site, by being in construction, and everything was very much about like this relationship between people, like the construction workers, the people that inhabited all this housing that I was developing, that I would like give the keys to. So there was always like this very personal relationship to everything that I was. At first, I understood it as building, then it kind of like little by little changed. Now I'm not so much involved in construction anymore, but I think I really learned from the ground up, and improvising. I think Tijuana is, for me, has always been this collage, and as we were saying, this idea of trying to contain the city is kind of weird when I think there's so much to learn from Tijuana. Next. So these are just a couple of the projects we've developed, from rental housing in New York, a tech platform that was trying to solve some housing issues in Denver, New York, and LA, housing we've done in Mexico City, and the housing in Tijuana. Next. So these are just some of those first houses we did. Next. All of this, I would like just buy the land, build, and sell. So basically, it was a little bit, I was very young and very naive, and I was kind of like trying to change the aesthetic of the city, because I had no client for this house. I would just like build them and hope that someone would like them and buy them. And actually this house was bought by a guy that eventually became my business partner in Mexico City. Next. Another house next. So everything was very, very like experimental and just playing around. I actually had to convince the owner of the land to even change the construction guidelines, because you could only build California style houses at that point. So like 2008, 2009, there was not a lot going on in Tijuana. I told him that I would buy some sites if I could build whatever I want. Next. So just single family homes. Next. And this actually I did with my business partner in Mexico City. When he moved to Mexico City, he was like, I don't like anything here. Why don't we buy a site and start doing some housing there? So we did this. Next. This is a 5-unit development in Tijuana too that we did during the pandemic. Next. Next. And talking about preservation, I had the opportunity to buy this 1905 house that was like super beautiful in a very interesting neighborhood in Mexico City. And what most developers do is that they'll keep the facade, demolish the rest, and just build something new. We actually restored the whole thing. And now people are just moving in. It's been so amazing to see it come to life, because it's filled with artists, designers, some chefs. And in the end, that's what we're always interested in, just how can we create platforms that create communities. Next. So this is how the house was, like super beautiful, and just like how we were restoring it. Next. So like, for example, this is original, all of this is original. This, we had to change the foundations. We just like replicated what was there originally. This is my office there right now. Next. Yeah, just like some beautiful details like that. Next. I think this was kind of like the watershed moment for me in our work. We actually got to design this building there. We didn't develop it. When I was trying to change the scale of my work, going from like a couple of houses, some like horizontal developments, to actually larger scale multifamily development, I couldn't do it on my own. Like financially, like it was too big. So I just worked with a couple of larger groups trying to learn how that would work. I did like 3 larger buildings that I designed for other developers. This is one of them. But then this one, basically, we really took that idea of informality, of what Hugo was saying, like Tijuana, half of it was developed informally. People just like doing a lot of self-built housing. And this project was kind of like this idea of how can we create this concrete structure and grid that's very flexible and that can really evolve through time to change as the needs of people change. And something that was also very important here is that in this neighborhood, there was only like higher end housing being developed. So we did this building that I think is the only like really co-living building in the city, and one of the first actual like ground up co-living buildings in the world, in which you could actually rent even just a room. So you would share some common areas. So there's apartments that have 4 rooms. You rent a room and you share a kitchen, a living room, dining room. And there's also some micro studios within the building. Next. And next. And the whole building was developed and designed so that any circulation kind of becomes a meeting point and becomes a communal area. And the idea was that whoever lived there would take over, like completely take over the space. When we were designing it, we didn't imagine it would come to the point where they completely took it over, because people started moving in, I think it was like November of 2019. and rents were going okay, whatever. The pandemic hits. Every person in their 20s wants to leave their home and not live with their parents, so they moved here. So for 2 years, this was like the most like crazy building. There were parties every night. Every one of the neighbors was complaining, but it really became like a super, super interesting community. And that really like this, what we did here was kind of like a lesson learned and really impacted everything we've done since. Next. So after that, created this tech platform in which one of the main problems in developing housing is obviously is that we don't develop enough. It's supply and demand. And the industry is very archaic, fragmented, and unscalable. So we were trying to solve it through a tech platform that basically kind of like bridges the gap between development and construction, which right now is very disconnected. Most development that goes on in the US is done by, not in San Diego. San Diego is unique that it has a lot of architect developers, but around the US it's done by more like institutional capital managers that are not interested in housing or cities or anything except returns. So basically we're just trying to create products that could be replicated. Next. And really one of the things that is very important is that you need different types of housing for different stages in life. Not everything has to be the same, so we're focused on a lot of co-living, micro units. Next. All this was ground up. We didn't get to build it ground up, but we did 5 buildings that were adaptive reuse of existing pre-war buildings, 4 of them in Brooklyn, 1 of them in Manhattan. This was the first one with a mural here by an amazing artist called Eduardo Sarabia. Next. And within our work in Tijuana, it's kind of like concentrated within a certain part of the city. Next. And just doing like, always trying to figure out different, basically different projects that meet different needs of people. Next. I think a lot of developers are always like, oh, that building worked, I'll just do the same. And for us, every new project is a new opportunity to create something new. This one specifically, we're very focused on like younger families. So all of these are townhouses, 2 floors, 3 bedrooms, and a patio in the center that was like the most important part of the project. And in the end, in Mexico, you can build something that would be impossible to build here. So we have a lot of opportunities there. Next. And this was the most important part of the project. Right now, you go there and it's like full of kids every afternoon. There's bicycles, skateboards, everything. And all of the front doors of the units always face this patio. They're always open, like this idea of how can you create communities. Next. And now I'm just gonna show like very quickly some buildings that we recently developed or that we're building right now. Because in the end, it's amazing that like San Diego, the shortage of housing that it has, and in the end, Tijuana, we get to build a lot. Next. So this one we're just finishing right now. People are gonna start moving in, I think, next month. Next. This one is under construction right now. Next. And design-wise, like for example, this one, we're focused on doing family units, or we're doing like smaller 2-bedroom units. And we always like to innovate not only in construction or design or whatever, but mostly on the financial side of it. How can you create different capital stacks, or how can you make it easier for someone to purchase an apartment? So the most important thing for me about this project is that you can buy an apartment with approximately $10,000 down, which is not that common even in Mexico. So we structure the whole like development deal around making it more affordable for people to actually buy something. Because in the end, in Tijuana, a lot of people work here in San Diego, as we were saying, it's like interconnected. A lot of people pay very high rents, but it's almost impossible to actually buy something because they don't have the down payment that's required, that's sometimes like 30% of the value of the unit. So we really like play around with the financials in order to create housing that's like actually viable or next. And I mean, it's still very good quality of housing. Next. It's under construction right now. Next. This is another one we launched recently in which we're doing like very small units. Same thing. How can we make it more affordable for younger people to actually buy something? So in the end, as we know here in the US, a lot of wealth has always been created through owning a single family home. Mexico, a lot of people are not having that opportunity, so we're always trying to see how we can create that product and create that structure for people to acquire something. Next. That's one of the common areas in that building. Next. This one's under construction too. Next. So very small units, but we see them as starter homes. Next. Next. And this, as I was saying, this is not a very common model in Mexico, but in the end, we were able to figure out financially how to create a multi-family project. So this is 55 units all in rent. And we actually have a lot of like Americans living there since San Diego is just so unaffordable. So because we didn't sell any unit, we were able to basically build something different that we wouldn't have been able to build if we were doing condos on that side, which is like what everyone does in Tijuana. So we put together a different capital stack in order to create smaller units that are actually more affordable. The building has some very nice common areas. Next. I mean, this is like just insane. And to be to have these numbers in San Diego and really not try to figure out how to innovate on the capital stacks or different sides of it, like I think it's a problem that I really don't see is going to be fixed anytime soon. Next. Next. And I mean, in the end, we're always trying to connect what we're doing no matter where it is. New York, Tijuana, same artist, just trying to integrate what we like and what we love into our buildings. And if you haven't visited Tijuana lately, it's really a construction boom. The city looks very different than it used to. Next. I think that's it. Next. Next. I think that's it.
If I could invite the speakers to come up to the front of the room. We have a little bit of time for questions and answers, so if anyone would like to ask anyone a question or a general question to the panel, come on up. I'm going to start off with a question while you're thinking of yours. Thank you. And my question is, I recently wrote an article here locally called "Density is Not a Dirty Word." And it was about the sports arena, which has been very controversial. There's community groups opposed to the project that's being recommended there called Midway Rising. It's only an 8-story project, but the community is against it. They say it's going to block views of the ocean, but the environmental impact study shows that it's not blocking views of the ocean. So on the US side of the border, there's a lot of anti-density mentality, and I wondered if some of you want to, because Alfonso, a lot of your images were 6 to 8 story buildings, kind of medium density. I know you guys are doing housing and you're thinking about more density as well. Hugo, even in your paintings and murals, you're capturing that the changing. You talked about the change of Tijuana, and some of it's not good. Maybe there is erasure, but there's also hopefully a new city emerging that will be better. So I wonder if any of you want to comment on the question of density and how it's kind of being embraced, I think, on the Mexican side of the border, and we're trying to do it on our side, but there's a lot of resistance to it. I don't know if any of you want to comment.
there's definitely a lot of NIMBYs in Tijuana too, and it's the same reason. They all think their single family homes are like impacted in value if more housing gets built, which is really, really insane. And I think it's just about educating people in a way. You can't have more, like, housing won't be more affordable if you don't build more. In the end, like, everything's just supply and demand.
I think, no, I'm optimistic about density as well. I understand, particularly in San Diego, with the new late use, filling projects even at a smaller scale. There's resistance, of course, in really high-end neighborhoods, but I think we are in that transition. And in my opinion, what we're gonna see eventually is trying to bring more diversity in our environment with the density, not only square footage, but as well different programs, different economies. So I think if that resistance, if we can continue making it strategic in ways that we can build more equitable environments, it will be something very positive. So there's a lot to learn from Tijuana. At the same time, Tijuana does it so much that builds over watersheds, and creates these problems. But so that's where that balance has to come.
Yeah, I just leave it for what Adriana says. I think that density is great, but I think it's density, but diversity is more important than just the density of it. I think diversity is more important than density, like whatever. Because you can create density, but if it's a mono kind of condition, then you have a problem. So diversity is, for me, is much more important. So if we think about it, even the rules like the FAR flow area ratio, which is a variable that is just about density, I think that we've been researching that we should incorporate transformation area ratios and productive area ratios. That is about bringing that level of saying how transformation happens, how diversity happens, and how these elements are needed to value even more than just the density itself. I think that the other aspect is that land speculation is one of the biggest problems in how affordability. I don't think it's anymore so much the idea of the unit or the housing itself, but it's more the speculation of land. The policies and the politics that are being embedded in land and how it's being permitted and what is creating the biggest problem. And that's, I think, is a factor that we need to kind of tackle more. That is not precisely architecture, but it's more land policy conditions that happen in the polemic.
Thank you. Question in the back.
Well, I was just gonna say that
sorry.
I'm not an architect, I'm not a developer, I'm just an artist. But yes, I feel like density is inevitable. Like even with the immigration laws now, that you have to stay in Mexico to get your appointment. That no longer exists across. I don't know. It's inevitable. This diversity is being forced into Tijuana. To work, I always feel that. Well, I feel optimistic because the way I grew up was, we solve the problem. Somehow we work around them and we make them. So then I feel that's what we need to celebrate. I feel about Tijuana. Yes.
Thanks.
Hi, everyone. My name is Linda Caballero Sotelo, and my work lies at the intersection of cultural public policies and the lived environment with communities. And I was very curious and very intrigued by the mention of historic preservation and also monuments and that whole topic, which is a worldwide topic. I don't know that it's something that I've heard referenced very often when we're talking about the lived environment in Tijuana. And I think it's fascinating given its history. So I'm curious to know how that's being incorporated, not only in all of your work when you think about what you're doing, but also the reception you're getting from the municipalities and state government in support of those efforts, both for preservation and for naming the environment you're working in.
Anyone take that?
This talks about a little bit because we're working and creating publications that try to rescue different typologies in the city. And it's true, it's very hard because the cities, almost we think that the city is so young that it doesn't have any history in many ways, right? That we think that we think that everything's the new thing, right? Everything's new, almost like the symptom. Well, let's go back a little bit to the history of Tijuana and saying, that El Casino Agua Caliente, what existed, it was there because what it was illegal in the U.S. was legal in Mexico, right? So this idea of the landscape as almost as an opportunistic landscape, right? It is about what is legal and illegality. City Tijuana is always trying to say, well, I need to reinvent myself always to these conditions of pressure, of legality and not legality. And in that sense, architecture has been used as an element that is temporal. We can change it, we can demolish it. We need to keep up. And so many people even think about, I remember Puente Mexico, when it was being demolished, peers, colleagues, architects, they say, oh yeah, it's so ugly, let's get rid of it. So there's no evolving of a culture of educating and understanding the value that we have, right? And it's always like a problem. So yes, you have this resistance with public officials, we have a resistance even within your colleagues, you have this resistance. And we hope that by educating, in my opinion, that's the little bit of what we can do is the new generation start instilling that there is much more than just what you see in front of you. There's a history, there's a lot to learn from that. So we're working with different institutions right now, working on that. So yes, it's not easy. We have not developed a big impact. We hope in the next 3 years when our publications, we put it out there, we hope we can get a little more impact in that.
Thank you for the question. I think it's a really relevant one. I believe we are in the initial stages. I mean, in my humble opinion, because we're just getting into it more strategically. But I believe the question of heritage is on both in the environment and the non-built environment and the built environment. For example, one highlight of the Cañada is that even though it's designated a conservation site, there are people living in the canyon, houseless, and which is understandable, and sometimes they even become protectors of the place. But the municipality from Playas come in and erase the landscape so that they can survey. This idea of surveillance is in safety and security takes over any value or sensibility towards humans or environment. And I think it's the same case on the idea of the values on economy, on safety, whatever is productive. We are still, in my opinion, living in this tabula rasa from the modernist approach in the 60s, where in order to move forward, we need to make really bold changes. The second story highway, I don't know if you've been maybe to Tijuana, driving to the Playas or Rosarito. This new highway on the second floor, which is incredibly monumental, I think it addresses many questions. Well, we continue to modernize the city. How do we become as well protectors of our history? And I think as this conversation starts to propagate, again, I'm optimistic of the future. I believe that I think we share all of our work somehow interdisciplinary, start to tackle similar subjects that we're working on together.
Well, all I can say is just, as an artist, again, I love playing with this idea of surrealism, the surrealist aspect of Mexico, of Tijuana. I always get a pushback from authorities, from Tijuana authorities. Why are you painting that agenda negra? We're trying to erase that history, but I celebrate it. Like I look at the illustrations of Gustave Doré in the Divine Comedy, and the images of hell are always the most interesting ones. So then I feel like as an artist, at least that's what I can contribute. Celebrate its history, good or bad, it's all part of it, and it brings color and flavor to it. Yeah.
I'll take your question in a second. Just a quick comment. I actually wrote about this in one of my books, From Aztec to High Tech, a little story about the difference between how architecture is perceived in the United States and in Mexico. Ricardo Legorreta, very famous Mexican modernist architect, always used to say, all Mexicans are architects in their hearts. And in the United States, not so much. I was at a party in Tijuana, and they had the TV on, and Jay Leno had a comedian on his show, and they were talking about, what do you do when you're bombing? And the comedian said that sometimes you get to the point where you're so desperate, you'll even tell a joke about architecture, right? And my Mexican friends looked at me and they were like, why is that funny? And I said, because in the United States, Americans don't think architecture is that important, and if you're that desperate that you're telling a joke about architecture, that's pretty pathetic. But in Mexico, they don't perceive it that way. So we live on this border, and yet we do have different perceptions of art and architecture and how important that is in the cultural sort of mindset. Something to think about as we move forward. Yeah, did you have a question?
Can we just have the developer comment on that, if you don't mind? Because it's a very different scenario in Tijuana and here, and I'm interested to hear from a developer doing that work in Tijuana if there are any incentives from the municipality for you to use conservation or those notions in your work.
No, none. I mean, in Mexico City, it was super interesting because we went through INA, INVA, like all this like process, and everyone goes through it and they still like demolish most of it. I actually collaborated a little bit on a project to restore IMAC, which is like one of the few important historic buildings in Tijuana, which like is also like you see Casa de la Cultura, like they're tied together. And it's been impossible to do anything because they haven't been able to go through the process of INA, and it's literally just like paint and like very simple like cosmetic things that are like not doing anything new, just like restoration. But yeah, everything's so politicized in Mexico that I think it's really impossible to do anything. But I mean, I think the houses I demolished, the buildings have like no value. But there's a few houses in Tijuana that are definitely worth keeping.
But there's an interesting because La Caton Basal, right, which is this firm in France, which is interesting that we are in an era that is, they say, don't destroy, none. You don't demolish anything. La Caton Basal is like, the new era is about really rescuing as much. We need to be more sustainable. And I think we should, not because of historical conditions, not because only because we are in a state we need to kind of see how to take advantage of everything that is around us. And I really think that it's not just about history, but it's about being sustainable in many ways.
Yes, I had a question about the border in the administrative sense of the term, and I was wondering to what extent this affects the kind of cross-border work you are doing. So I was wondering, especially if the constraints of circulating across the border, especially from south to north, to what extent this can affect the kind of projects that you are making across the borders, and if there are some obstacles that you're facing, and especially in the past year, if that has changed. So yeah.
I mean, in my experience lately, yes, of course, we work with students and we work with exhibitions and by nationality, and just that logistics of what I produce for San Diego that I can cross the border, without getting in trouble or too large, inside the structures that were designed. It was this whole logistic of just bringing it over to the border. There has been a lot of fear from students to cross. I've been trying for the past 2 years and failing on bringing large groups to Tijuana. But luckily, it seems like, I don't know, this Wednesday I'm taking a group of students that has been one of the largest ones. There's a lot of interest now. So culturally, I think people are awakening because of all of the tensions that have been going on, and people want to do something about it and becoming more active. At the same time, in the past, there was actually much more fear, but maybe in my opinion, there's more resistance right now that might be productive.
Well, yes, the border for me has always been an obstacle, and that's why I started doing a lot of improvised murals, because I couldn't bring stuff along. It was just me going into a space and creating performances. So yes, it's always been about smuggling work up north.
One last comment. Does anyone want to say? I guess we've been asked to wrap it up.
I just think you're going to say that, for instance, if Central Park is to New York, if Champs-Élysées is to France, right? If these things are, the border is our context, how can we convert that into a space? It is a division, it is hostile, but we need to know how to engage with it, and we need to convert it into something. And I think that that's the idea of constraint. It could be a positive also in how to construct a more imaginary conditions of future. Is it beyond that?
Yeah, I've talked about the idea that the border doesn't have to be a fortified space, it could be a livable space. Because clearly people live around the border and cross it all the time. And so this mentality of building walls and thinking of it as a fortified boundary, that's a 19th century idea. So this idea of rebordering and bringing back the 19th century border, it's not realistic in the 21st century. I mean, the work that Alfonso is doing and the work that Adriana and Marcel are doing and Hugo is doing and all of us are doing here is transnational. And we need to think of our region that way. I've always said that. Some people have attacked me because they say transfrontier metropolis. It is unequal. I never said that the Mexican side is equal to the US side. I don't think that's the point. I think the point we're making here is that we share everything. And so we need to create a way to make that sharedness more part of our daily reality. And to answer your question, I think the role of the federal government should be to facilitate crossing, not to make it harder to cross. The role of the government should be to make it easier to cross. Yes, you screen those that need to be screened, and everybody else, it should be a lot easier to get across. And that's a work in progress, I would say. So thanks so much to everyone for being here in this panel. And thank you.